Hey everybody, I am here today to talk about, finally, I'm doing a video on leveling the vat. And I wanted to clear the air between what people call the Flint Read method, or leveling with the vat, using the vat instead of paper, or leveling with paper, or some of the printer companies give you an actual card to use. So this is going to be a quick video, but I want to talk for a minute about leveling. Leveling is so important. We know this, a lot of us came from FDM, so we know how important leveling is in FDM, and it's the same in resin. And if people are just going straight to resin, leveling is so critical to do right. It's easy to do, but it's also easy to do wrong. And if you do it wrong, things fail. And a lot of posts I see these days on Facebook, a lot of people's stuff isn't sticking to their build plate. And then I see people say, lube the FEP with, PTFE or some other kind of lubricant, level with the vat, level with the paper, all different kind of things. So let's talk about a couple things you can eliminate if you go to print and nothing is stuck to your build plate, right? So there's a few reasons this happens. One, your build plate was not leveled properly. It's possible. Two, it could be your resin is not shaken properly. If your resin sits in the vat even unused for more than 24 hours, there's a very good chance when you print it won't adhere to the build plate. And you might think it's something else, but it's simply resin not shaken. So when you go a new bottle, shake it well. If you have existing resin in a vat, make sure you either stir it, agitate it in some way. Some people, instead of running the print, just lower the build plate in and out to mix it, which for me it's easier. I have a little toothbrush that has silicone tip, and I just gently mix it. So you eliminate the things you can control. So make sure your resin is always mixed. Two, temperature. For me personally, I know for a fact if my temperature drops below 72 Fahrenheit, 22 C, and I don't change my settings, my prints will not stick to my build plate. So temperature is another critical thing that's easy for you to control. So let's say now you've eliminated temperature and whether your resin's shaken, stirred. You only have two factors then. First one, which I mentioned, either your build plate is not leveled properly, or number two, your bottom exposure time is not high enough. So you're not getting that. So what I mean there is, if your bottom exposure time is too low, you're not giving the resin enough time to cook, to stick to that build plate and pull out. Okay, let's say you also eliminate bottom exposure being too low because you've done your homework, you've asked in Facebook groups, or you've watched videos, you know your bottom exposure time is correct for your resin. So now if something's not sticking and you eliminated temperature, shaking your resin, and bottom exposure, it only leaves one thing. Plate's not leveled properly. So since leveling the plate is one of the most important things you can do, let's talk about it, because one thing I also see from people is they'll show a picture and half their print is adhering and half is peeling off. Or parts will print in one part of the plate but not the other. And that's because they haven't leveled it equally. So let's just talk about the process. When you have a 4-screw leveling system or on the ball joint, once you loosen your screws, your plate becomes basically free floating, right? So the way it works is when your printer lowers down to do the leveling, it touches down, right? Hits the limit switch, goes up, and then gently lowers into place. Once it lowers into place, you need to tighten it. What you need to do is you need to press down, and I press down with some force. Now, don't lean on your build plate with two hands and all your weight and crack your screen and then tell me, Greg, you idiot, you told me to press down hard. Okay, use common sense. By press down hard, I mean press down so if you go to pull the paper, you can't pull it. It won't move. Press it like that so you can't move the paper. Then what I do is I tighten one screw just so I feel resistance. I go the opposite corner, tighten that screw just so I meet a little resistance. Then come back to this side and I tighten the screw till it meets resistance. And then the fourth one, I tighten till it meets resistance. Once I do that, and I'm still holding it very tightly down so it can't move, because when you go to tighten the screws, it can pull the plate up. And I think this is what gets a lot of people. Then I just tighten them all, again, never letting my pressure off the plate. I just tighten them all, fairly tight. Don't be looking to strip the screws or anything, right? And you can see the plate's trying to move, but I won't let it because of my downward pressure. This happens to be a flimsier build plate from a company I won't mention. So that's why I have it just loose floating around, because I won't use it. But anyway, then when I've tightened everything, once you tighten it, pull that paper. You shouldn't be able to pull it. If from any side you can pull it, it means that corner, when you were tightening, got pulled up a little bit, a little off balance. You don't want that. And I think a lot of the errors I see from people posting pictures on Facebook is they do the first part fine. They're not pressing down hard enough. Or maybe they're not quite pressing down equally when they go to tighten the screws. Or maybe they tighten all one side first and it puts too much pressure and pulls the build plate a little bit. So it's important. And look, and this has happened to me. When I'm done, I go to pull the paper. It can move. Okay. Undo the screws, do the process again. Since it only takes a minute, not even, you do it till you get it right. Because if you do it right, you don't have to do it again, unless something weird happens. You don't have to do it again, for the next 6 months, a year, maybe till you throw the printer out. I mean, I think on most of my printers, I don't know that I've ever re-leveled. I think on one, I got a fail or two, and I figured either I hadn't done it properly or maybe it had moved somehow, so I re-leveled. But basically on all my printers, once I level, I'm done. Okay, now let's talk about something. Now let's go into a little bit more of the controversy. I'm talking about Flint Read. So when people talk about the Flint Read method of leveling, they're not talking about Flint like Flint and Tinder and Reed like a reed in a musical instrument. It's Flint Read is a person. And he's a guy who made a video sometime last year saying, screw this paper stuff, I'm going to level right in the vat. Like, why not? And leveling in the vat works. Okay? And it makes sense. If you level the plate in the vat, it should be the right height because it's just level on the FEP. The FEP pressed into the LCD screen. Now, I've seen some people say that leveling in the vat is the only way to make it work, and let's talk about that. That's nonsense, okay? I have leveled over 20 printers using just a sheet of paper like this, and every single one of them prints with no adhesion problems. So if someone says you can only level in the vat to get good results, it's blatantly wrong. Okay, it makes no sense at all. There's a reason every single manufacturer that I know of, and maybe some of you in the comments tell me if you get a printer from a manufacturer that says use the vat, every single manufacturer says use a sheet of paper. And a lot of them these days give you a sheet of paper or even almost a little piece of like cardstock to use. So let's talk about that. And I do not recommend the Flint Read method. I do not recommend leveling with the vat, and let me tell you why. Because you heard me say that it works, and it works quite well. But here's the caveat. If you level in the vat, first of all, it's harder to get to the screws for me because you have to do it this way, and that means you can't turn them fast, but whatever. Forgetting that part, I level in the vat. I can't pull a piece of paper. I can't pull and slide the vat to make sure that I've leveled all four corners equally. So for that reason alone, to me, leveling the vat is way worse because I can't check what I've done. When I do with the paper, if my corner's up, I'll know, right? So leveling with the vat does work, but you can't use the checks and balances, which is pulling on the paper, that you can use with the paper. Now, let's just talk in theory about paper versus vat. Why would someone say the vat's the best way to do it? I honestly don't know why. The average FEP sheet in thickness is 0.1 millimeter up to some of the NFEP is a little thicker. It can be 0.125. So we've got 0.1 to 0.125 thickness of this sheet. Paper is actually thinner than your FEP in general. Paper that most people would get a hold of for copy paper, printer paper, which is what I use, is usually anywhere from what I can gather from 0.07 up to 0.1. So the paper is actually a little thinner than the FEP. So when you level tight to the paper, you're leveling very tight to the FEP. So paper is recommended by every manufacturer, and I believe this is why. It's a little thinner than your FEP, so it gets you nice and you get down tight to the paper, you're perfectly nice and tight to the FEP. Now, if you say to me, wait a second, if I'm that tight, aren't I smushing the FEP? Yes, you are. The FEP is more flexible than the paper. So you can smush down into the FEP. That's actually fine. In fact, that's what you want. That's why companies are recommending you to use paper that's actually a little thinner than their FEP. Because if you're tight to the paper, you're definitely nice and tight to that FEP. And that's what you need for the good adhesion. You want only the very thinnest layer of resin between the plate and the FEP. You want it baked onto your build plate, nice and solid. And when that pulls up, boom, you're good to go. So, to settle once and for all, and I'm not trying to be, someone accused me once of sounding arrogant, and then someone else said just because he's from New York. I'm not trying to be arrogant. I'm actually quite humble. I know there's a lot I still don't know. This is still a new hobby and industry for all of us, and I'm learning as I go, and I'm just trying to share what I learn. But when I know something is right, I'm going to confidently say that it's right. So I will confidently say there is no reason to level in your vat. And in fact, one of the things I didn't talk about before, I'll bring up now, the other, to me, bad thing about leveling the vat is if you make some kind of mistake or error or do something wrong, you're more likely, you're not going to damage the piece of paper, but you can damage your FEP. So why even take that chance? There is, and I honestly don't understand this. I actually have seen some people post that they tried leveling with paper and it didn't work, but they leveled in the vat and it worked. Honestly, I don't understand how that's possible. I'm not saying those people are lying by any stretch. I just don't comprehend the physics of how you could level in the vat and it would work, but you can't use paper to get the same result. And again, every single manufacturer that I know of recommends using paper. I have never gotten instructions on leveling from any company I've ever dealt with that said level using the vat. So that's it for the video. I just wanted to go over leveling in the vat versus leveling with paper, and also the correct way to level. It's really easy to do right. Just make sure when you press down, you can't move the paper. When you finish tightening those screws, you still can't move the paper, okay? If you can, don't be lazy. Just undo the screws, do it again till you have it right. Once you know that build plate is really level, and here's the other funny thing, on Facebook, when people are posting pics like this, I know everyone's in the same boat I am. When we're trying to help people, we don't know if they've actually leveled properly, right? So one thing, like you can screenshot us your settings, and I can see if your exposure time looks right. When you say you've leveled and you've done it right, I, of course, have no way of knowing if you really leveled correctly. So when people are having adhesion issues, it's funny, as when you're trying to help people, you just really never know. Despite, even if they say I leveled 5 times, maybe they leveled wrong 5 times. I don't know how they did it. So hopefully this video will help you guys just make sure you've leveled correctly. If you've leveled correctly, you've eliminated one big element that causes failures in 3D printing. So anyway, hopefully this video helps you guys out. Please like, please subscribe, please watch my other videos if you need help. Please back my Wukong Kickstarter. I'll have a link to it. It's really awesome art from Twin Goddess, who's a smaller Patreon, but they make just gorgeous sculpts. If you look at the stuff, you'll see everything they do just has this like flow to it. It's really, really nice stuff. That's it. Thanks, everybody. Happy 3D printing.